Nothing I can do to remedy this.
You can have my room.
Now, there's a clever man.
Thank you for joining us as we are examining economic lessons from Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. My name's Matt Rosu. Dan Bragen, incoming Ph.D. student at Clemson University and recent Susquehanna grad, is with me again. Dan, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And please like and subscribe. You will get more content on Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon economics, and really a lot of what we think is kind of fun ways to learn economics through the channel. So hope like, subscribe, click the notifications bell. Today, we're going to go back to the basics, demand and supply, and a couple clips within Game of Thrones. We'll go to the first clip right now.
What?
I'm sorry, my lord. We'll fill up every room.
My men can sleep in the stable. As for myself, I don't require a large room.
Truly, my lord. We have nothing.
Is there nothing I can do to remedy this?
You can have my room.
Now, there's a clever man.
Short clip, but Tyrion wants a room and he's willing to pay for it. Bronn accepts. When you see this, how do you think about the demand and supply aspect on this, Dan?
I think there's a bunch of different ways you could take it. I think the first way is Tyrion, if we want to think of this as like a market scenario, Tyrion is very clearly a consumer. He's on the demand side of things. I think it's also important to consider that he is a very wealthy individual. He has a lot of money to spend. And in this case, he really wants a room. It doesn't have to be a big room, but he wants a room. And presumably because he's rich, he probably has a lot more money to offer for a room. And you can see he goes around the table and kind of almost obnoxiously clangs this coin on the table. And you can assume that it's a lot of money that he's putting around. And he's hoping that someone with a room is willing to sell to him the room for that currency, that money. I think it's dragons in the Game of Thrones universe, dragon coins, I forget. But Bronn right away almost is like, yeah, here, have my room.
Yeah.
And they exchange money. And it's sort of the basis of a market, but also, Bronn, in this example, is clearly a supplier. There's a certain price he's willing to forgo his good and accept the exchange that makes him better off. And Tyrion's offering whatever, maybe it's lower than the coin that Tyrion's offering, but Tyrion's offering certainly enough money for him to give up this room and be happy with it. And there's a mutually beneficial exchange going on here that sort of undermines all markets, at least free markets.
Seen this a bunch of times now, but you're mentioning on Tyrion, right? I guess one thing in economics we also talk about is elasticity. And how price sensitive are you? And it could be on the buying, it could be on the consumer side or on the producer side. Tyrion clearly is not price sensitive. He wants the room, he's going to pay for it. And I mean, I imagine, right, if that's an ounce of gold, what is gold, $2,000? If I was in a hotel and, somebody knocked a $2,000 gold coin, and like, I'd figure that out. Or some people get bumped from a flight because, the airlines will say, we need to bump somebody. Does anybody want however much money? So I think that part's fascinating. The other part that you alluded to, I agree with everything you said, certainly on the supply and demand side, is it's a good example actually of a resale market. We think about, there are places where reselling tickets, right? Like scalping tickets is what, it's called. It's not legal. You couldn't buy a ticket and then go and sell it. More and more that's becoming legal, and economists generally are in favor of that, those as legal markets. But it's a good example here of a legal market, a legal secondary market. The inn provider sells it for one price. Bronn has it and decides, oh, yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and take 5 times the markup, like somebody might do for a Taylor Swift ticket. Or I remember back when Hamilton was big, our family got tickets way ahead of time, and they were, normal, reasonably priced tickets, and we could have sold them for a lot. A lot of, they would have gone for a lot of money when we saw them. I actually mentioned the idea to my kids that, hey, we could resell them and then just go in another year or so. It was a Christmas present for the kids, and they did look at me like I was taking away Christmas when I even mentioned it. We didn't end up going with that, but we just went. But the resale markets really generally do increase efficiency. So I think that's kind of an interesting second point here.
Yeah, and just particularly, I guess, with resource efficiency, moving resources to those who most value it, have or most willing to give up other resources in order to acquire that resource. Tyrion values the room a lot more than Bronn does, apparently, and Bronn is okay with giving it away at that price. So there's this efficient, mutually beneficial exchange going on.
Yeah, both sides are happy, right? Like both sides. Tyrion clearly wants the room, and it's worth more than that gold coin. And Bronn, as you said, he didn't take very long to think about. Hey,
Yeah.
yeah, I could be uncomfortable. Give me the gold. So this was from the first season, actually, of Game of Thrones. So kind of the beginning of the series. The next clip we'll show is from the current season of House of the Dragon.
The markets have been running low since the blockade.
Surely the city cannot yet be short of food.
I think not, but people are afraid. Those with means are hoarding everything they can. I walked 2 hours today to find a chicken for the pot, and paid 3 times as much as I should have.
The selfishness of people.
I cannot blame anyone for doing what I myself would do if I could.
I don't think you let children go hungry while you filled your own cellars.
Lucky we don't have enough coin to find out.
The king has promised us some relief.
It's a few different concepts we could go through on this second clip. So there's a blockade going on, and as we hear, either there is a perceived shortage of food, or as they say, people are hoarding food. So if a perceived shortage and people are buying more than they would have bought otherwise, or an actual shortage of food that's going on. But either way, we're seeing some of the implications of this. So we paid 3 times more than we should have, is the quote, which should is normative, right? Normative is the opinion-based, positive is fact-based, but I think we could safely say I paid 3 times more than I normally pay, and that would be a positive analysis. So when you hear this, what do we suppose is going on then with the market for food?
Well, certainly there's some sort of inflation happening if she's paying 3 times more. The blockade that's happening is restricting the supply of chicken in this case.
Yeah.
When I watch that clip, and this is my first time watching that clip because I haven't gotten to this episode yet, it definitely makes me think of the negative consequences of blockades, but sanctions, other
Sure.
sort of economic penalties that nations use when it comes to foreign policy and sort of political economy stuff like that. The trade embargo the United States has on Cuba for, I guess, presumably since the 1960s.
Sure.
The negative consequence from that, goods from the United States aren't getting there, so people in Cuba aren't receiving these goods that they want. But then also on the flip side, those producers in the United States aren't really able to trade with them, and they're losing out on that producer surplus there too. But I think with this clip, there's just so many different ways you can take it. You think of price gouging, and I think the arguments have surrounded COVID with toilet paper, toothpaste, or there's another hurricane happening. So I imagine there'll be some form of price gouging occurring in the areas that are unfortunately impacted by that. You can think of this clip in that context. Are those who charge higher prices selfish, or are they just acting in response to supply and demand? And can they really be blameworthy for that? Yeah, I think you can take this a bunch of different ways, but those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. Like, first and foremost, I mean, the first thing I see here is, okay, the supply is down, standard supply curve analysis, and the price is up, and the price is clearly up pretty dramatically on that. And that's basic demand and supply first couple weeks in the class, honestly. But a nice little example here of a demand and supply issues that we're seeing. In terms of the why, why is it happening and how is it happening? I think the Cuba part is interesting. How much more are people in the US paying for Cuban cigars, for example? Not being a cigar aficionado myself, I don't know what cigars generally go for. I don't know what a Cuban cigar goes for, but legally you're not supposed to have them here. So if you do, you know, it's through an illegal market, and price would certainly be quite a bit higher. I think sugar is another area where we could have gotten, I know the sugar lobby is supposedly incredibly powerful. Like, you never hear of big sugar in terms of, because it's not a product that seems like it's high priced, but it's in everything. And I mean, I've seen the analysis, and American households pay a ton more for groceries overall, for the sugar they buy for mixing themselves, and for all the ingredients that have it, because of all of the restrictions on importing sugar going on. So that's there. That's an interesting one. Yeah, we're recording this right as the hurricane's hitting Texas. I like what you bring up on that regard. So there's a bit of I always think it's an interesting normative question, and when I teach principles, I'll bring this up. But when these laws, what kind of laws, if you're a policymaker, and this is very much normative, what kind of laws should you be putting in place, regarding increases in prices for, say, fuel, like gasoline or anything else? And I think it's really tricky on this one. And my general reaction is there probably should be no laws on it. If you're a policymaker and there's places that are doubling or tripling the price of something, it looks very bad. And indeed, I think that's not a very nice thing that people are doing to charge that. But I know that with, for example, with Hurricane Sandy that hit New Jersey, there were people, if the price goes up enough, there are people from Pennsylvania who would load up a truck. They would load up 6 gallons of gas. They would buy all the 6-gallon bins they could get. They'd load up a truck and they'd bring it over to New Jersey. And, if they could sell it for double the normal price, that could be a day's worth of work for them. That's actually against the law. Like, they could go to prison for doing that. And so I do think by having those laws, you end up restricting supply, but it's a tough issue. And that's, we've talked about normative versus positive a lot. That's very much a normative view, that I think getting the supply up whatever way you can, including allowing the price to fluctuate and inducing, is worth it. But that it's a tricky issue when the hurricanes hit.
Yep. And I think it's also important to think about, if you do institute, I guess, anti-price gouging laws, there are other ways in which consumers pay for it. Queues, there's black markets.
Yeah.
It isn't necessarily a remedy to be like, well, you can't raise your prices more than 10%. I know states like Florida have things like that. So it's hard. And maybe for something like water, or there's necessities, maybe there's arguments there, or the inability of certain markets for suppliers to respond when it comes to, temporary
Sure.
housing. I'm not sure how. I mean, I'm sure there are ways. I'm not familiar with them, how suppliers could respond to a hurricane that kind of just came about. There's so many ways you can increase the supply of housing within that short time period.
Yeah, housing.
So maybe
housing
in
would
that
be tough.
circumstance, yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And
Yeah.
normative versus positive, and relating back to the clip, it's the king, or the one character says the king's going to try and find ways to provide relief. Maybe that's subsidizing some of the cost. Maybe that's moving grain from certain mills or whatever. There are other ways maybe to address it that the king is trying to find.
Yeah, trying to increase production, perhaps.
Yeah.
Your mention about the other costs reminds me. Last week, our family took a trip to Quebec, and we were there on Canada Day, which was always kind of interesting. But there was a place, we did a tour in the morning, and they mentioned, hey, there's going to be they're giving away cake up there, like a free piece of Canada cake at the park. And I'm like, will they run out? And like, no, there's going to be a lot of cake. You could go up there. And so we went up, and we got it was this was noon or 1 o'clock. It's somewhat festive up there. And we get up and we see the line, and we're like, this cake is not free. Because the line was massive, and it's a piece of cake, right? I mean, it's worth $1. It was not worth 20 minutes to a half hour for us to wait in line on a vacation for something we could buy at the store for, $2 or something.
Yeah.
So there is a very real cost of waiting in lines.
Yep. And maybe if you guys really, really wanted Canada cake and they were selling it for, I don't know what the price was. I think, did you say $2 or something?
I'm just guessing. They
Yeah,
weren't
yeah,
selling. Yeah, they were giving this cake away, but I'm like, I don't know. You could get a piece of
Yeah.
cake for a couple bucks. Yeah.
But if they were selling it for $20 and you guys really, really wanted Canada cake, then
Yeah.
that line becomes a lot shorter, and you guys are willing, have the disposable income to buy
Yeah.
said Canada cake.
Yep.
There's some way that the market can address that there.
Yeah. So yeah, this was just, it's kind of it was a nice thing they did, and clearly a lot of people liked it, and festive atmosphere up there. But yeah, we decided that we could go on with do other things to
Without Canada
explore.
cake.
We don't need Canada cake there, but all sorts of different things in the clip. If you watch that and you think of something different, we didn't even touch too much on we touched a little on international trade and tariffs, and certainly a lot of that going on in our country and the election, tariffs being proposed and all of that. But if you see other things in this clip or either of these clips that you think we missed, please leave a comment. But any other thoughts on demand and supply analysis from either of these clips?
No, I think the clips really speak for themselves this time too, particularly the last one, just stuff on greedflation and everything, and the selfishness or lack of selfishness from some suppliers. I think clips do a good job.
Yeah, pretty fascinating clips. So thank you to everybody for tuning in. Once again, this is part of a series on economic lessons from Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. So if you like this, check out some of the other videos through this series, and we'll see you in the next video.